Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël.
Republicans have to get tougher and fight. We have some that are great fighters, but they have to get tougher and fight because the Democrats are trying to hurt the Republican Party for the election.
Donald Trump there calling on his own party to fight tougher against the impeachment process. It comes after Trump was forced to retreat on issues like Syria and the G7 following GOP pushback. And after one House Republican became the first to say that he's open to impeaching Trump, Fox News host Chris Wallace revealing rumblings on Capitol Hill against the president.
I talked to a very well-connected Republican in Washington this week, somebody whose name you would know well, who says that if the House votes to impeach and it gets to a trial in the Senate, there is now a 20% chance, he believes, obviously it's just an estimate, now a 20% chance enough Republicans will vote with the Democrats to remove the president.
All right, betting markets have in fact increased the odds since the Ukraine scandal exploded recently. In fact, skeptics might say reality is closer to this scene from Dumb and Dumber. Watch.
What do you think the chances are of a guy like you and a girl like me ending up together?
I'd say more like 1 out of a million.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
Yeah! So there is a chance, guys. Joining me now, Matt Welch, editor-at-large for Reason Magazine, and Elise Jordan, former aide in the Bush White House, now an MSNBC political analyst. Great to have both of you here on set. Matt, let me begin with you. There is a chance because the president is calling on Republicans to get tougher. So if you're reading that messaging coming out of the White House, it means he's not happy with the response so far.
I mean, he retreated from the G7 thing in a hurry. He didn't do that because he was getting beat up on MSNBC. He did that because he needs people to hold the line. And this plus the Syrian action are both cases where there was a loud amount of grumbling on Capitol Hill. Problem for him is that we forget now, but in 2016, when he's running in the general election against Hillary Clinton, more than 10 GOP senators never endorsed him. They don't like him, right? You know, we tend to think because he has such strong support among Republicans and among lawmakers, where people sit on their hands, or they even defend him, that it's out of affection. It's not. It's out of fear. It's out of fear that their districts like him more than
it's a political calculation, not about liking Trump.
So when you have this Ukraine deal being a lot more, it's polling a lot worse for Donald Trump than the Mueller report stuff ever did, that begins to change that calculation. So we start to see that support start to dwindle.
You would think the president, if he had any kind of political savvy, would be like, this is not the week I should do something in Syria. It's certainly not the week I should try to do something that is controversial, like announce the G7 summit. He lost support within his own party because of these two. That has got to be a political misstep.
Donald Trump can't control his impulsivity, and what we have seen in all of these recent actions, he just goes with what he wants in the moment, whether it is telling an outright lie, like saying that he's born in Germany, like he did that once, or, it's deciding to capitulate to the Turkish dictator. There's not much of a chess game going on. And I think that that's part of the bigger picture, that so often that, this grand design is ascribed to what he's doing in a given moment, and it's just not there. And you see just how self-destructive he is at the end of the day.
Let me play for you guys the spectrum of responses. You got Mitt Romney on one end, you got Senator Lindsey Graham on the other. Watch their takes.
Are you open-minded if more comes out that you could support impeachment?
Sure. I mean, show me something that is a crime. If you could show me that, Trump actually was engaging in a quid pro quo outside the phone call, that would be very disturbing.
And saying, China, will you investigate my political opponent is wrong. We certainly can't have presidents asking foreign countries to provide something of political value that is, after all, against the law.
What do you make of Lindsey Graham's response there? I mean, he's taking a narrow definition. He's qualifying it by saying, outside the phone call, almost tacitly saying like, it happened in the phone call, but outside the phone call, did something else happen? And secondly, saying you have to show me a crime. That's not what the Constitution says. There is the bar of high crimes and misdemeanors.
Sure, and there's also the treasure trove of tapes from Lindsey Graham in 1998 saying different things about impeachment. But I think it's actually significant that he seems to be wobbling a little bit in this case. It shows that there's a possible weakness of support. But I want to just rush in here. Yeah. I've seen now for 2.5 years those people in the media and a lot of Democrats have this sort of wish fulfillment syndrome when it comes to everyone wants to get to the end state of this, and they're rushing forward towards it. There's been a lot of kind of magical thinking on there. If you've been betting on Republicans to stand up to Trump, you have lost so many bets up until now. So yes, it could happen, but there has to be, I think, a really sober set of
Is it 1 in a million, like in
investigations?
I think you're making an important point. Yeah. You look at, though, how all of the preconditions are really coming into place. This was a bad summer for Donald Trump. I called it his racist recession summer. He's tweeting, and then the Dow drops by 2.5%. Then you go into September, and then it's the Ukrainian debacle. Then now it's the Syria debacle. Donald Trump has had such a litany of missteps over the past just 2 months, and particularly with Republicans who are concerned about foreign policy. You finally have Mitch McConnell writing an op-ed. Granted, he talks more about Obama than Trump, but clearly Republicans are unnerved by the recent direction.
And I think it shows the limitations of the get over it defense. At some point, that makes it untenable for Republicans to wake up and look at themselves in the mirror.
Let me get your thoughts on this. You've got a little bit of groundswell growing in terms of the polls, GOP support saying that impeachment is growing at least a little bit, the inquiry phase, not necessarily the trial phase. A New York Times column says Americans should take to the streets on impeachment. I'm curious to get your thoughts. Do you think that street protests, street demonstrations camped out in front of the White House could add any, not necessarily in the White House, but even back in some of these Republican districts for senators that may be up in 2020?
God, no.
That wouldn't make a difference.
No. Street protests. Were you here in 2004? Do you remember the Republican National Convention? There were 200,000 people in the streets, anti-war demonstration. Did that move the needle? I mean, I was happy to see people protesting the war. There should be more people doing that on that kind of principle. But street protests very, very rarely have anything to do with anything except for the way that it makes the protesters themselves feel. I don't think that that's going to take a swing state Republican and say, you know what, I'm going to do it this time.
Nobody likes to respond to some mob pressure, I guess. Certainly not here. What do you think?
What congressmen and senators do respond to, keep calling their phone line over and over and
Showing
over.
Up at those town halls.
Show up at those town halls. Pressure them to do town halls. Pressure them to get out there. It is just incredible to me how many Republican congressmen and women in the Trump era do not actually show up for town halls. And it's the contrast, with someone like Justin Amash, who actually does go out and explain his thinking. It's just very stark.
I think some of those town halls may have been the reason why they were able to save, to some extent, Obamacare early in the Republican-controlled House when they put that pressure on them from voting against it.
It is Tuesday, the 22nd of October of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A scant dash of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. Well, the world is as it is, and as it is, some people might say it's on fire or about to blow up in our faces. So while that's going on, personal tragedies come to the fore as well. Life is tough. It's so beautiful, but only in small amounts, because most of the time life is just painful. I know it could be an attitude problem to think that way, but the coincidences of life are tough. They're tough to handle. And what am I speaking about? Well, as I'm still grieving over the loss of my adult son, my only child. Now my dad is deteriorating quickly. Hopefully there's going to be a rally. Hopefully. He's almost 91. He'll be 91 in February. And in the last month and a half, he's had a few issues and had to have some medical procedures, small ones. But in the midst of that, somehow his sodium level has fallen dramatically, and he's very confused. And I've seen this before. It's just tough when it's your dad. It portends something could be happening very quickly. And with that being said, we may have to turn the radio station here, Netroots Radio, into a robot station, meaning that the free-form, handcrafted radio that you hear on Netroots Radio will be more programmable. And that is because generally we don't take the broadcaster with us anymore. It has to stay in place. So if that's the case, we will apologize ahead of time for the schedule being somewhat messed up. Now, there are presets. You won't miss David, hopefully, because I do have a bit of a problem with the broadcaster. That's why we've been accumulating funds to purchase a newish one. So it's working less as a laptop and more like a desktop. So if there is a power pop here, sometimes the broadcaster has to be reset manually. And if I'm not here to do it, maybe I can get my nephew, but it won't be quick. So that said, I don't know how long it would be that I would be gone. Days, at least. Those of you who have already gone through this, I'm sorry for bringing up, well, sad memories at least. But I'm just giving folks a heads up because we are truly working on somewhat of a skeleton crew here, and those of us who are left are flung far and wide. So there is that. But we appreciate your loyalty to this little endeavor of resistance. And, well, what else has been happening in the world? I gave you the heads up. So what else is happening in the world? It looks like Donald Trump is not going to have the G7 at Bedbug Doral. Good thing, too. Though he's saying that, oh, yeah, it's because everybody's going out of their brains and they just hate Trump. And I don't think people are really going out of their brains. They are rationally analyzing the situation and saying, just put yourself in the position of a foreign world leader. Would you want to go to Doral, knowing how that place is? Come on, take him to Camp David. What's wrong with Camp David? You know what's wrong with Camp David. Donald Trump is a germaphobe. He cannot stand the woods. And I'm going to tell you right now, we've already got the Steele dossier, even though it's not a dossier, it's raw data. But you know the P-tape? You know what the P-tape is about? He was defouling the bed that Michelle and Barack slept in. That's what that was about. Do you think that he's going to be able to sleep in the same bed that Obama slept in at Camp David? Well, Teddy Roosevelt did too, but that's big. It's been defouled. When you're at Camp David, it's a lot harder to bring in some Russian hookers to defoul the bed by peeing on it. So that's why he doesn't want to have it at Camp David. Also, he doesn't make any money directly into his pocket. This guy's such a bottom feeder. Money does not confer wisdom, intelligence, or even taste. What's on the rest of the menu here? In the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, Trump wants the GOP to work harder against his removal, just as key Republicans are increasingly open to impeaching him. Well, let's hope that that stays true, because I don't trust the GOP in anything. Anything. On the rest of the menu, speaking of the GOP, they happen to be strangely silent after the State Department exonerated Hillary Clinton on page A16 of the New York Times over that derpity-derp email scandal. Derpity-derp. The Colorado GOP needed 13,506 signatures to recall enough state lawmakers to regain a majority in the Senate. They got 4. Count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Even with Russian help. These recall efforts are Russian active measures. I'm not kidding you, and I'm not being hyperbolic, and I'm not giving a tinfoil hat conspiracy. But speaking of which, the FBI won't alert anyone, anywhere, anyhow, if voting systems are hacked by hostile foreign powers until after an election. They're in a catch-22 of their own making. After the break, we then moved to the chef's table, where Benjamin Netanyahu gave up his effort to form a new government, creating an opportunity for centrist rival Benny Gantz to replace Israel's longest-serving prime minister. Bye-bye, Ben. Bye-bye. And a Russian group hijacked an Iranian spying operation to attack governments and industries in dozens of countries while masquerading as attackers from ISIS. It sounds like a Russian nesting doll strategy to me. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page, is our chat room link, deftly located there by Superior Graphic Design. Thank you, Tom. Right there next to the social media scroll. And our chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, because you need a monitor. And Kelly does that for us. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is our Patreon link, and do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. All kidding aside, we're rather jocular around here, but the issue of funding is always a serious issue, because the bulk of what we pay for here comes out of our own pockets and wallets, but we would still be unable to do it without you. And thank you for your generosity over all these many years. We take our job quite seriously, and you have allowed us to fulfill our civic duty that the founders originally intended all those many decades ago, almost an eon now. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. And Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. I take care of at Justice Putnam, so you could follow me there. And I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and get that linked up on social media for your social media pleasure. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, iTunes, YouTube, and wherever podcasts can be found. I think Instagram, too, for some reason. I don't know. Oh, no. Tumblr still exists. All right. Well, we ought to get right on into these offerings here. I do so apologize. I'm a little torn up about my dad. It's to be expected. I mean, he's almost 91. We've been preparing ourselves for this, but it's just heartbreaking to see someone who has always been there. He's always there, and seeing that slip away. We always think it won't happen to us. Dad and I never spoke about that, not happening. It's just, this is the part of life where we see that the machinery sometimes takes over the conscious awareness of self. Yeah, the machine wears out, and it doesn't matter what you think. So it's weird coming to the conclusion that we're nothing but replicants, and we don't get more live. Fuckers. We don't. All right, we better get into this first offering, and it comes out of Share Blue Media by Josh Israel. Republicans have been largely silent following the release of a State Department report last week that cleared former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton of any deliberate mishandling of classified information when she used her personal email to conduct official government business, unlike the Trump kids and everybody else in the Trump administration, and even Trump himself, who uses his own private devices to do what he does. But Hillary is a witch, and you've been told that for almost 40 to 50 years now. And if you don't believe it, what's wrong with you? You're supposed to be brainwashed by now. Most everybody has a knee-jerk reaction to Hillary Clinton. She can't even speak as a private citizen. I mean, think of how many times McCain, he's dead, but still, think of how many times John McCain went on every single news show on Sundays, and even during the week. He lost an election. Everybody had to hear what John McCain had to say. But Hillary is a witch. You've been told that. She is evil. So evil. Her power is so immense that even liberals think that she should be locked up for merely breathing, giving Tulsi Gabbard life, because Hillary opined that maybe, all evidence to the contrary, she might have something to do with being groomed as a third-party candidate. It doesn't matter to me or anyone else whether Tulsi Gabbard is actively in pursuit of being groomed by Vlad. She's either a dupe or an idiot if she's not conscious of it and actively getting paid. But let's be clear. She is being groomed as a third-party candidate by Vlad, and she's not the only one. They had Jill Stein. Jill Stein's kind of went past her sell date. Got to get some new dupes and idiots out there to do the work, and they're glad to do it. And I don't care what kind of service she's had. Mike Flynn put his life on the line as a soldier, and he's an asset. And he better be going to jail, all right? I know the Federalist Society is stacked on judiciary with incompetence. But still, the rule of law better prevail, because otherwise, well, what are we then? A cacotocracy? We're a oligarchy? You name it. We're not a democracy, that's for sure, not representative. Additionally, APD adjudicated 497... Oh, I'm sorry, I missed a paragraph here. The report sent to Finance Committee Chair Chuck Grassley found 38 employees culpable of violating department security protocol But those violations did not apply to any transmitted material that had been marked as classified. There was no persuasive evidence of systemic, deliberate mishandling of classified information, the report concluded. The report was the result of a years-long probe into Clinton's email practices, which Donald Trump roundly criticized. During the 2016 election, Trump repeatedly hammered Clinton over her use of a private server. Which reminds me, what about that private server in Trump Tower that's linked up directly to Alpha Bank? Why don't we hear about that anymore? Curious, isn't it? Or convenient? He frequently led campaign rally attendees in chants of lock her up, and even said he would investigate Clinton if elected president. And you know what? Barr is running around right now investigating the investigators because his delay after the Mueller report came out, where he took control of the report and put their spin on it for a week or more, so that when the Mueller report actually came out, no one bothered to read it. They'd already heard the story. And when it was discovered that Barr said the exact opposite of what the Mueller report reported, well, now he's going around the world fixing the story so that the good guys are the corrupt ones. It's rather jarring hearing out of Trump's mouth that he is a champion against corruption. Jeez, he's a champion of corruption. That's how he's been able to make money all these years. Well, the Republican National Committee followed suit. Hillary Clinton continues to get called out for lies about her reckless email server that put national security at risk, the official RNC account tweeted the following month in 2016 when Trump had his chance of lock her up. But since the release of this information on Friday, Trump and the RNC have said little. Neither have apologized for their role in playing up the email scandal, and neither responded to emails asking whether they stood by their previous allegations. And I'll tell you why. Because my experience from these Trump bro, Trumpettes, and traitor bots is that this decision by the State Department to exonerate Hillary is just more proof of how evil and powerful she is, because the deep state has let her off. Israel of Share Blue Media also brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. With Democrats holding a narrow 19-16 majority in the Colorado State Senate, U.S. Representative Ken Buck, a repug of Colorado, announced in March that he had a scheme to stop progressive legislation. After Buck was elected as the new state party chair, he vowed to use the state's recall process to remove duly elected Democratic officials during their terms. You know, election nullification. With the tally in now, it would be an understatement to say his efforts came up short. Several months after Buck promised his party that he would teach Colorado Democrats how to spell R-E-C-A-L-L. The fifth and final recall attempt of the year failed due to a lack of signatures. Of the 13,506 valid signatures needed to force a recall, organizers showed up Friday with just 120 signatures. Hours later, Colorado State Secretary of State Jenna Griswold announced that only 4 of those were valid. In recent months, efforts to recall Democratic Governor Jared Polis, Democratic State Senators Brittany Peterson and Pete Lee, and Democratic State Rep Tom Sullivan have all failed for lack of petition signatures as well. But none of those failures were quite as profound as this latest recall effort. The organizers of the effort to remove the state Senate president told reporters they did not know how many signatures they had, but they were optimistic. They arrived Friday at the Colorado State Secretary of State's office carrying 2 large Budweiser boxes. Then one organizer told a Denver Post reporter that they were delivering at most 120 signatures and keeping some others for fear of doxing. It's unclear why someone would sign a public ballot petition to recall a candidate if they did not want their signature to be submitted. After his election as chair, with the support of Senator Cory Gardner, the state's sole remaining statewide elected Republican, Buck promised he would let the world know this is not a blue state. After his recall scheme went bust with Gardner's 2020 election chances looking unlikely, it looks like Buck might have to reshift his focus. Anonymous worker bees at the Associated Press bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. If the FBI discovers that foreign hackers have infiltrated the networks of your county election office, you may not find out about it until after the voting is over, and your governor and other state officials may be kept in the dark too. There's no federal law compelling state and local governments to share information when an electoral system is hacked, and a federal policy keeps details secret by shielding the identity of all cyber victims regardless of whether election systems are involved. Election officials are in a difficult spot. If someone else's voting system is targeted, they want to know exactly what happened so they can protect their own system. Yet, when their own systems are targeted, they may be cautious about disclosing details. They must balance the need for openness with worries over undermining any criminal investigation, and they want to avoid chaos or confusion, the kind of disruption that hackers want. Of course, it seems to me like the hackers are achieving what they need, because this seems fairly disrupted if we're in the dark about whether our election systems are being manipulated so somebody wins that shouldn't be. The secrecy surrounding foreign hacks is not a hypothetical issue. The public still does not know which Florida counties were breached by Russian agents in the 2016 election. Rick Scott, Florida's governor in 2016 and now a U.S. senator, was told at the time and didn't learn most of the details until this year. And the threat to electoral systems is real. Federal officials believe Russian agents in 2016 searched for vulnerabilities with election systems in all 50 states. And the nation's intelligence chiefs warned that Russia and other nations remain interested in interfering in U.S. elections. In general, it's up to electoral agencies to disclose when they've been hacked. That, plus the federal policy protecting the identity of cyber victims, could mean state election officials might not be told immediately if one of their local election offices experiences a breach. In addition, the whole situation could be considered classified as part of a federal investigation. Department of Homeland Security officials say privacy is needed to ensure that officials come forward and share valuable threat information, such as suspect IP addresses. Some election officials could be hesitant about public disclosures, concerned their agencies would be portrayed in a negative light. That could create dangerous delays in sharing information. And Homeland Security acts as a middleman between the intelligence community and the states. In general, communication and coordination on election security have improved in the last 2 years. Due to the criminal nature of cyber breaches, law enforcement officials may seek to withhold releasing certain information long after the incident. When Florida's current governor, Ron DeSantis, was briefed this year on 2016 cyber breaches, he said he signed an agreement preventing him from identifying the affected counties. But you know what? We've got a bunch of pictures of him with Igor and Ivan. And they're very happy, too. In June, a majority of Americans expressed at least some concern that voting systems are vulnerable to hackers. Yet, election officials want to ensure they have a good understanding of what happened before going public so they don't contribute to the confusion that the hackers may be trying to achieve. Well, they are achieving it. And that brings us to our break, which we better break too. And when we come back from said break, we are going to go through weather from around the world, and we are going to finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Tropey Dearest. So, in Judy, director Rupert Gould has gotten together with screenwriter Tom Edge and, bound to win some award for her performance, Renee Zellweger, and they have all made an adaptation of Peter Quilter's much-lauded musical drama, End of the Rainbow. And I'm shocked that Judy is a British film based on a British play by a British playwright because it seems tailor-made for Hollywood's sensibilities. Let me tell you. Judy focuses on Judy Garland right before her death, when years of professional instability have made one of the screen's biggest stars almost unhireable. So Judy must leave her children to take a cabaret engagement in London so she can make enough money to take care of said children. And so the kernel of this movie is the story that we've been fed over and over and over and over again, the family in jeopardy. And Quilter could have centered his play on something else. It could have been about an aged performer who still has talent but finds her material and history not connecting with a new younger audience. It could have been about how Garland drew people to her who profited off her talent while they drained her. It could have been a study of the cost of the great urge that drives a great performer to perform. It could have been about the relationship between artist and audience, which at one moment can be loving and inspirational, and then the next moment can be dismissive and abusive. It could have been about the construction of a gay male icon. It could have been about how the tragedy of someone who was thrown into an unrelentingly public life at an early age suffered greatly for failing to make a private life for herself. Judy touches on all these aspects of Garland's life, but at its core is one of the few roles where it's safe for women to be extraordinary. Supermom fighting for her children. And like I said, everybody does it well. I just wish they'd been as ambitious about their chosen theme as they were in executing the theme they chose. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. It might seem obvious that the primary function of insect repellents like DEET is to, well, repel. But if you bring a pipette tip full of DEET right up to a mosquito, as Johns Hopkins neuroscientist Chris Potter did,
she just ignores it. So that really does demonstrate that, DEET by itself, it's not repellent, and it's not going to make them fly away.
Potter's team also genetically engineered Anopheles mosquitoes to make their antennae light up when their olfactory neurons picked up on a scent. But when they spritzed the antennae with DEET and other so-called synthetic repellents, even at 100% strength,
there just was no response. So that was kind of a surprise to us, because going into this, we thought, okay, they're insect repellents. They're going to activate neurons. That's how they repel mosquitoes. And so then, the question is, well, what are they actually doing?
The researchers kept experimenting with those genetically modified mosquitoes to find out. A whiff of molecules commonly found on human skin made the mosquito's antennae light up like a Christmas tree, Potter says, so they do sense us, which you've likely experienced. But when they combined compounds from our natural human perfume with DEET and other synthetic repellents, the antennae just flickered dimly.
So these odors, which before would strongly activate the olfactory system, essentially now didn't do anything.
Meaning repellents like DEET actually act like an invisibility cloak against mosquitoes. The details are in the journal Current Biology. Natural repellents, on the other hand, like lemongrass oil, strongly activated the skeeter's senses in a negative way, and they weren't as affected by masking chemicals like DEET. So the scientists say maybe you could cook up a combination to both offend the mosquito's senses and to mask the more irresistible scent of you. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Heart disease and stroke can be catastrophic. They're leading causes of death, disability, and healthcare spending in the U.S., yet they're largely preventable. Alarmingly, heart disease and stroke are taking a toll on middle-aged adults 35 to 64, with over 800,000 deaths and hospitalizations in 2016. Million Hearts is a national initiative focused on preventing 1 million heart attacks, strokes, and other cardiovascular events by 2022. Coordinated actions by Million Hearts partners in communities, healthcare, and public health will keep people healthy, optimize care, and improve outcomes in populations at risk. Everyone has a part to play. Focus on the ABCs of heart health. A. Aspirin use when appropriate. B. Blood pressure control. C. Cholesterol management. And S. Smoking cessation. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
October 11th, 2019, United States District Court for the Southern District of New York. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. In the case of the city and state of New York, Connecticut, and Vermont versus the Department of Homeland Security, the issue was the new proposed DHS rule on public charge, a rule that said that when a lawful and documented immigrant receives, say, 6 months of SNAP and Medicaid benefits, which together count as 12 months, within 3 years, that person can be deported. The new proposed DHS rule was, as the judge found, a drastic deviation from the unambiguous and well-established meaning of the term public charge that has existed in immigration law for over 130 years. It means a person who is likely to become primarily and permanently dependent on the government. The judge ruled, quote, "The rule is simply a new agency policy of exclusion in search of a justification. It is repugnant to the American dream of the opportunity for prosperity and success through hard work and upward mobility. Immigrants have always come to this country seeking a better life for themselves and their posterity. With or without help, most succeed." The judge ruled the DHS had no legal authority to rewrite long-standing law. And, quote, Plaintiff's motion for issuance of a preliminary injunction is granted. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1981. The United States Federal Labor Relations Authority voted to decertify the Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization, or PATCO. The PATCO union had gone on strike earlier that year over wages, hours, and working conditions. President Ronald Reagan demanded the workers return to work or be fired. When the union decided to stay out, he fired more than 11,000 workers. Federal law prohibited federal workers from participating in a strike. Yet until Reagan, the law was not strictly enforced. The three-person Federal Labor Relations Authority sided with Ronald Reagan. Originally, their decision was 2 votes to 1 against the union. But less than 2 weeks later, the last member changed his vote in support of decertification. The union attempted to fight the decertification with a court appeal. Their efforts failed. In one of labor's great ironies, PATCO had actually endorsed Ronald Reagan for president. Leading up to the 1980 presidential election, Ronald Reagan had written a letter to the president of the union. In the letter, he promised, "You can rest assured that if I'm elected president, I will take whatever steps are necessary to provide our air traffic controllers with the most modern equipment available and to adjust staff levels and work days so that they are commensurate with achieving a maximum degree of public safety." He also pledged a spirit of cooperation between the president and the air traffic controllers. Within a year, the union had been decertified. What happened at PATCO sent a chill through the labor movement of the United States. Since then, other Republican politicians, like Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, have sought to undermine public sector unions. In doing so, they often invoke the memory of Ronald Reagan and PATCO. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
House Democrats are reportedly zeroing in on a framework for impeachment that will center on a simple abuse of power narrative. This according to multiple people familiar with the deliberations. One person said it's the big point that Pelosi has been hammering home and the umbrella under which this all fits to connect it and help the public understand. There are only 2 depositions on this week's calendar. Thursday and Friday are being set aside for the funeral and events surrounding Elijah Cummings, who passed away late last week. On Tuesday, perhaps the most consequential witness to sit for a deposition so far, Ambassador Bill Taylor. He's the top U.S. diplomat in Ukraine and the guy in the text messages with former Special Envoy for Ukraine Kurt Volker and U.S. Ambassador to the EU Gordon Sondland, who repeatedly expressed his concerns about foreign policy moves being tied to political motives, writing that it was, quote, crazy to withhold security assistance for help with a political campaign. Yeah, that guy. And on Wednesday, it's Laura Cooper, a top Pentagon official. Now, the Democratic-controlled House on Monday rejected a GOP proposal to censure Congressman Adam Schiff, chair of the House Intelligence Committee, for his depiction during that September 26th hearing of the phone call in which Trump urged Ukrainian President Zelensky to investigate former Vice President Joe Biden. Democrats blocked the floor vote. Earlier in the day, Trump had called for his fellow Republicans to get tougher and fight the impeachment proceedings. Good luck with that. On the world stage, there's a lot happening. Residents of a Kurdish-controlled city threw rocks and potatoes at a caravan of departing U.S. troops, shouting at the military vehicles as they passed on their way to crossing the border from Syria into Iraq. In one video distributed by the Kurdish news agency, a man shouted, "Like rats, America is running away." More than 100 U.S. military vehicles left Syrian Kurdish territory as the U.S. withdrew most of the 1,000 U.S. personnel who fought alongside the Kurds against ISIS. Now, in the wake of massive criticism, Trump is reportedly considering leaving 200 troops behind to guard the oil fields. In Canada, Justin Trudeau will serve another term as Prime Minister, this after Liberals won a plurality of seats in Parliament.
From coast to coast to coast, tonight, Canadians rejected division and negativity.
Justin Trudeau's Liberals are projected to win Canada's elections, but lose their majority. It means that the country's incumbent Prime Minister will hold on to his job.
You are sending our Liberal team back to work, back to Ottawa with a clear mandate. We will make life more affordable. We will continue to fight climate change. We will get guns off our streets, and we will keep investing in Canadians.
But the 47-year-old will enter a second term with less power than before, and will now need the support of a smaller left-leaning party in order to govern. Trudeau's seen as one of the world's most high-profile progressive leaders. He took power in 2015 as a charismatic figure, promising sunnier ways and championing diversity. But his hard-fought election campaign has been tainted by scandal. His popularity dropped as old photos of him in blackface emerged, and his handling of a corporate corruption case was widely criticised. In August, a top watchdog said Trudeau breached ethics rules.
And across the pond, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is pushing for Parliament to approve his Brexit deal on Tuesday in what he has called a do-or-die moment ahead of Britain's scheduled October 31st departure from the EU. The House of Commons Speaker John Bercow rejected his call for a Monday vote, saying that Johnson's Monday request was essentially the same one that Parliament rejected on Saturday. Stay tuned. And in Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Monday that he had failed in his effort to form a governing coalition following a near tie in last month's elections. Israeli President Reuven Rivlin said he would let Netanyahu's rival, former Army Chief of Staff Benny Gantz, try to pull together a ruling coalition. Gantz now has 28 days to see if he can succeed where Netanyahu failed. Northern Ireland legalized abortion and same-sex marriage at midnight in a major shift for a traditionally conservative territory. Under the old laws, women could be arrested for getting or even seeking an abortion. And we'll end with a postscript. Following a years-long investigation by Donald Trump's State Department into former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's private email server, found that while the use of the system for official business increased the risk of compromising classified information, there was no systemic or deliberate mishandling of classified information. The 9-page unclassified report completed last month and shared with Congress this week concluded, quote, there was no persuasive evidence of systemic, deliberate mishandling of classified information, end quote. End story. Period. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com. Please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 48 degrees Fahrenheit. We are slated for a high of about 68 to 70. Overnight lows in the upper 40s to low 50s. Some clouds in the morning, and we're going to have a mix of clouds and sun throughout the day. A few clouds overnight. Winds will remain light and variable all day, all night, and all day tomorrow. And expected highs, it looks like, once again, upper 60s, low 70s. Lows overnight will be in the upper 40s, low 50s for the foreseeable future. Ragweed pollen is rated low. The air quality index is in the good range at 34 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is moderate at 3. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.39 inches. Visibility is at 8 miles, and relative humidity is at 98%. Wow. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 60 degrees and sunny. Paris is 58 and cloudy. Rome is 80 degrees and sunny. Kiev is 58 and fair. Kabul is also 58 and fair. Hong Kong is 74 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 62 and fair. Sydney, Australia is 65 and fair. San Francisco, California is 60 degrees and sunny. And New York, New York is 60 degrees Fahrenheit with a light rain. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Benjamin Netanyahu gave up his effort to form a new government after failing to secure a majority coalition, creating an opportunity for centrist rival Benny Gantz to replace Israel's longest-serving prime minister. Netanyahu, who heads the right-wing Likud party, said he had been unable to form a government following an election in September and was returning the mandate back to Israel's President Reuven Rivlin. Rivlin said he intends to task Gantz with the job of putting together a new government.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Jack Stubbs and Christopher Bing of Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Russian hackers piggybacked on an Iranian cyber espionage operation to attack government and industry organizations in dozens of countries while masquerading as attackers from the Islamic Republic, British and U.S. officials said. The Russian group, known as Turla and accused by Estonian and Czech authorities of operating on behalf of Russia's FSB security service, has used Iranian tools and computer infrastructure to successfully hack into organizations in at least 20 different countries over the last 18 months. The hacking campaign, the extent of which has not been previously revealed, was most active in the Middle East, but also targeted organizations in Britain. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. So do go to the links provided and read the rest of that article. It's quite stunning. So you do know that Netroots Radio is going to be broadcasting all day and all night. We're going to meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appétit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.